In a dramatic turn of events, more than 200 inmates, including high-profile Boko Haram commanders, escaped from the Maiduguri new prison in Borno State after a flood caused a major breach in the facility's perimeter wall. The incident occurred on Tuesday following torrential rainfall that led to severe flooding in Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State. An official from the Nigerian Correctional Service in Maiduguri, who preferred to remain anonymous, confirmed the incident, explaining that the heavy rains triggered the collapse of a section of the prison's wall, allowing the inmates to escape. The rain was torrential and caused a terrible flood that affected our facility. Part of the wall of the Maiduguri new prison collapsed, and some Boko Haram commanders held in our facility have escaped along with other prisoners. Those who escaped are more than 200 in total, the source said. Despite the severity of the situation, the authorities were able to swiftly respond by transferring approximately 200 other inmates to a different, more secure facility. This measure was taken to prevent further escapes and ensure the safety of the remaining prisoners. The escape of Boko Haram commanders, in particular, raises significant security concerns, given the group's history of violent insurgency and terrorism in Nigeria and neighboring countries. Boko Haram has been responsible for thousands of deaths and the displacement of millions, primarily in the northeastern part of the country. The escape of these commanders poses a heightened threat to national security and could potentially lead to an escalation of insurgent activities in the region. This prison break comes in stark contrast to the recent assurances made by the Borno state government, which had claimed that it had taken comprehensive measures to prevent flood-related disasters. Just 4 days prior to the incident, government officials had publicly stated that efforts were underway to mitigate the risks of flooding, particularly in vulnerable areas such as Maiduguri. However, the intensity of Tuesday's rainfall overwhelmed these preventive measures, leading to widespread flooding, displacement, and damage to critical infrastructure. The flooding, which affected Maiduguri and its surrounding communities, caused significant destruction, leaving hundreds of residents stranded and compounding the already precarious humanitarian situation in the region. For many, this disaster has only deepened the ongoing challenges posed by years of conflict and insecurity in Borno State. When contacted, the spokesperson for the Nigerian Correctional Service, Abubakar Umar, acknowledged the gravity of the situation but requested additional time before providing an official statement. "We're taking stock across the country. I can speak to the press 2 hours from now, so please call me in the next 2 hours," Umar said. As of now, there has been no further communication regarding the official response or plans to recapture the escaped inmates. The Nigerian Correctional Service, alongside other security agencies, is expected to intensify efforts to track down the escaped prisoners, especially the Boko Haram commanders, whose escape could have far-reaching implications for national security. The escape of over 200 inmates from a prison facility already dealing with high-profile detainees is likely to spark significant public concern, particularly in the northeastern part of Nigeria, where Boko Haram remains a potent force. The group's insurgency, which began in 2009, has continued to evolve over the years, and while the Nigerian military has made substantial gains in combating the group, incidents like this could embolden insurgents and undermine these efforts. This incident also raises critical questions about the state of infrastructure in the region, especially the ability of facilities such as prisons to withstand natural disasters like flooding. In the face of increasingly erratic weather patterns attributed to climate change, it is becoming clear that the region's infrastructure is ill-prepared to handle such emergencies. The resulting vulnerabilities not only pose risks to public safety, but also to the security apparatus of the country. As investigations continue, there will be a need for coordinated action from security agencies, disaster management teams, and the Nigerian government to both recapture the escaped inmates and address the larger issues that have been brought to light by this incident. First and foremost, efforts must focus on the immediate task of recapturing the escapees, with particular attention paid to the Boko Haram commanders whose freedom could embolden insurgent activities in the region. Security forces in Borno State and neighboring areas will likely ramp up surveillance and intelligence gathering efforts to locate and apprehend the fugitives. In addition to the security concerns, this event underscores the need for urgent infrastructural improvements in areas prone to flooding. The Nigerian government will likely face increased pressure to not only repair the damage caused by this flood, but also implement more robust and long-term strategies to prevent future disasters. This could involve upgrading existing flood defenses, improving drainage systems, and fortifying key infrastructure such as correctional facilities and military installations. Furthermore, there will likely be calls for a thorough investigation into how this disaster was allowed to happen, despite the government's previous assurances. Public confidence in the government's ability to manage both security and environmental risks is likely to be tested in the aftermath of this incident. The escape of over 200 inmates from the Maiduguri new prison, following the collapse of the facility's perimeter wall due to flooding, represents a serious breach of security with potentially far-reaching consequences. Among those who escaped were Boko Haram commanders, heightening concerns about the potential for renewed insurgent activity in the region. As authorities work to track down the escaped inmates, questions remain about the state of infrastructure in flood-prone areas and the effectiveness of government preventive measures. This incident highlights the complex interplay between security, infrastructure, and environmental challenges in Nigeria, particularly in regions like Borno State that are already grappling with conflict and instability. Not fewer than 200 inmates have escaped after a devastating flood pulled down a prison wall in Maiduguri, the Borno State capital. An official of the Nigerian Correctional Center in Maiduguri told Sahara reporters on Tuesday that over 200 inmates escaped from the facility after a portion of the facility's perimeter fence was pulled down in the aftermath of the flood that ravaged the city on Tuesday. The official, who spoke on condition of anonymity, disclosed that some Boko Haram commanders held at the Maiduguri new prison were among those who escaped. The source said, "The rain was torrential and caused terrible flood which affected our facility. Part of the wall of the Maiduguri new prison collapsed, and some Boko Haram commanders held in our facility have escaped with other prisoners. Those who escaped are more than 200 in all. We were able to move 200 other inmates to a different facility," the officer added. In a stark contradiction to the Borno State government's earlier assurances, the flood situation in Maiduguri took a turn for the worse on Tuesday, just 4 days after officials claimed to have implemented comprehensive preventive measures. As reported earlier by Sahara reporters, the devastating flood struck Maiduguri and surrounding communities in the early hours of Tuesday, leaving hundreds of residents stranded. The disaster has resulted in widespread destruction and displacement. When contacted, the spokesperson for the Nigerian Correctional Service, Abubakar Umar, regarding the issue, he said, "We're taking stock across the country. I can speak to the press 2 hours from now, so please call me in the next 2 hours." The situation remains fluid, and further updates are expected as officials from the Nigerian Correctional Service and other government agencies continue their response efforts. Public attention will now turn to how swiftly and effectively the government can address both the immediate security threat and the underlying infrastructural weaknesses exposed by this disaster. The escape of over 200 inmates from a Maiduguri prison, including some Boko Haram commanders, following a devastating flood raises profound concerns about Nigeria's preparedness in managing both environmental disasters and prison security. This situation reveals multiple layers of failure, from infrastructure planning to governmental response, and warrants a deep analysis. The initial and most glaring issue is the vulnerability of the prison facility to natural disasters, in this case flooding. Borno State had previously reassured its citizens of measures to prevent flooding, which suggests either incompetence or mismanagement in implementing these measures. The fact that a torrential downpour could bring down the wall of a correctional facility housing high-risk inmates, including Boko Haram commanders, is alarming. Prisons should be designed with security as the highest priority, taking into account the potential for natural disasters, particularly in a region like Borno State, which is prone to floods during the rainy season. This failure points to an underestimation of the threat posed by nature and poor execution of any flood prevention strategies. Critically, the government's lack of foresight here cannot be overlooked. What kind of assessments were conducted to ensure the prison's safety in adverse weather conditions? Were any updates or renovations made after previous floods in the region? The contradiction between the state's earlier assurances and the reality of this flood suggests a disconnect between policy pronouncements and actual preparedness. The escape of over 200 prisoners, including Boko Haram members, is a significant security lapse. Boko Haram is one of Nigeria's most dangerous terrorist organizations, and any escape by its commanders is a national security issue. The fact that high-profile inmates like these were housed in a prison with such vulnerabilities reflects poorly on prison management. Why were Boko Haram commanders kept in a facility with such an apparent risk, especially in an area prone to floods? This suggests a larger issue within Nigeria's correctional system, where either resources are not properly allocated or the danger posed by these inmates is not fully understood by those in charge. Moreover, it raises questions about the broader security framework within the prison. One would assume that a prison housing such dangerous individuals would have multiple security layers. Yet the collapse of one wall led to the escape of over 200 inmates. This implies that the facility may not have had adequate emergency protocols or sufficient personnel to handle such an event. How did these prisoners manage to flee so quickly? Were there no secondary containment measures? These questions point to significant shortcomings in both prison infrastructure and security policies. The official statement from the Nigerian Correctional Services spokesperson, Abubakar Umar, further adds to the complexity of the situation by deferring a response and saying, "We're taking stock across the country." Umar deflects immediate responsibility. While it is understandable that the authorities may need time to assess the full scope of the damage, the vagueness of this response gives the impression of a lack of urgency or preparedness. A more proactive approach would have been to immediately address public concerns about the implications of the escape and the security measures being taken to recapture the inmates, particularly the Boko Haram commanders. The government's delayed response only fuels public anxiety, as citizens are left wondering what immediate steps are being taken to prevent further escapes or violence. This brings up the issue of accountability. Who will be held responsible for this massive security breach? It's not just about recapturing the prisoners. It's about ensuring that the systems in place are competent enough to prevent such disasters in the first place. Without clear accountability, the risk of repeated incidents remains high. The fact that some of the escapees were Boko Haram commanders significantly escalates the gravity of this incident. Boko Haram has terrorized Nigeria, particularly in the northeastern region, for over a decade. Their commanders hold critical information about the group's operations, strategies, and plans. Allowing these individuals to escape poses a severe threat not only to the local population, but to national security. Inmates escaping is problematic enough, but when these prisoners are terrorists, the stakes are exponentially higher. There's the risk that these individuals could regroup, rejoin Boko Haram, or even facilitate new attacks. With their escape, intelligence that might have been gathered from these prisoners is now potentially lost, and the efforts to combat Boko Haram have taken a step back. The public's response to this incident is likely to be one of fear, frustration, and distrust in government institutions. The people of Maiduguri, who have been dealing with the scourge of Boko Haram for years, may now feel even more unsafe knowing that commanders of the terrorist group are on the loose. This escape not only exposes the state's vulnerability to natural disasters, but also highlights the fragility of its internal security mechanisms. For the residents of Maiduguri and surrounding areas, the implications are dire. Many are likely to question the government's ability to protect them. If a prison can't keep dangerous individuals like Boko Haram commanders locked up, what can ordinary citizens expect in terms of security? The government must act swiftly, not only to recapture the escaped prisoners, but also to reassure the public that measures are being put in place to prevent such incidents in the future. This may involve relocating high-risk prisoners to more secure facilities and bolstering the structural integrity of vulnerable prisons. From a critical standpoint, this incident reflects a broader issue of governance in Nigeria. The combination of poor infrastructure, a lack of preparedness for natural disasters, and security lapses suggests systemic weaknesses in both prison management and disaster response. While the immediate priority is the recapture of the escaped inmates, long-term solutions must focus on addressing these root causes. The government needs to conduct a thorough investigation into how the prison system allowed such a breach and, more importantly, implement reforms that ensure that this doesn't happen again. Moreover, there must be accountability at all levels, from those responsible for prison security to those tasked with managing disaster response. This incident demands more than just a superficial response. The government, the public, and security experts must engage in an honest dialogue about the structural weaknesses in Nigeria's disaster preparedness and prison systems. This is the end of our news update. Your comments and opinions will help shape this ongoing discussion. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day.